My name is Jim Shooter, former editor-in-chief of Marvel, also Valiant and other places. And I have to say, Mark Who at 42 is great.
Hello, everybody. This is Mark Who 42. I'm Juan in Orlando, and I'm being joined by the great Paul Weimer, who won the Hugo for Best Fan Writer and also was one of the co-winners of Best Fan Zine. And sadly, we're here. I've wanted to get him on the show for a long time, but sadly, the reason that we have him here is because Peter David, the great writer, passed away 2 weeks ago on May 24th on a Sunday. And he will be missed. Paul, you want to introduce yourself, or have I done a good job enough for you?
You've done a really good job. Yes, my name is Paul Weimer. I am a award-winning science fiction and fantasy fan writer who's been reading stuff for a very long time, including the works of Peter David, which is why I'm here on the show today. Thank you for having me, Juan.
No, it is an honor to have you. An honor to have you. So anyway, listen, when we're going to get back, we're going to talk about Peter's vast career because he had a big career in comics. He had a big career in novels, and he actually worked in television and film, and also he had a great nonfiction career. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we were going to look into the world of Peter David. So join us back for Mark Who 42.
Don't go away. Don't go away. We'll be back with more Mark Who 42 after this.
Oh, hey, I got something.
Since 2009, we have been the premier cartoon podcast here at the Geekcast Radio Network. We are Tooncast. From taking you beyond the cartoons we grew up with to seasonal saucy toon talk, and now we get the origins of toonsters everywhere as we ask guests 30 questions about their cartoon watching experiences, plus so much more. Tooncast is back. Join me, TFG and Mike, and the rest of the GCRN crew as we give you all the toon talk you will ever need, only on the GCRN, and wherever you consume your podcasts. We are beyond good, beyond evil, beyond your wildest imagination. We are all tunes all the time here on Tooncast.
Yeah.
Get ready for the ultimate geek experience right here in the Sunshine State. Florida Geek Scene presents a full calendar of events and conventions. From anime to horror, we've got it all. Meet your favorite stars, find rare collectibles, and immerse yourself in your passions. Experience the thrill of cosplay and witness amazing live performances. Stay up to date with the latest news and reviews all across Florida. Florida Geek Scene, where pop culture happens. Visit us online for more. Don't miss out on the fun. Join us at Florida Geek Scene, floridageekscene.com.
You are listening to Mark Who 42's Universe.
And we're back with Mark Who 42. We're going to be talking about Peter David. Paul, when was the first time you encountered Peter? Do you remember?
I do. Or that I knowingly did, like I identify, yes, this is a Peter David work, because as you know, Juan, he wrote lots of Incredible Hulk, and I may have read an issue or two during that run, but at that point, being 17, 18, I wasn't really paying attention to who was writing the comics. I was like, is this a cool storyline? I wasn't sophisticated enough as a comics reader to identify individual writers as yet. So the first time I actually knew that, hey, I'm reading a Peter David work was in 1993. So this is the era of Star Trek: The Next Generation. And I go into a bookstore, and I don't read a massive ton of tie-in stuff, but this was a let's see, 1930. This was a B. Dalton's in a mall in Staten Island. And I just happened to wander down and I see a Star Trek book called Imzadi. And I thought, well, that's interesting because Imzadi is a word from Star Trek Express. So I picked it up, it's like Peter David, Imzadi. Uh, I put it down. I didn't buy it then. It was like a couple weeks later, I went to a Star Trek convention in New York City at the Ambassador Hotel, and the guests were George Takei and Marina Sirtis. And Marina Sirtis started talking about Imzadi, the book, and how like it would be nice if they could turn that into a movie, but they'd have to, as I quote, have to give Jean-Luc a bigger part. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. I saw that book. I have to get this book now. So then the following weekend, I went back to B. Dalton to get the copy of Inzadi and read it in a couple of hours. It's like, well, what else is there? And so from there, I started working backwards on his books and forward on his books. So I came across things like Q and Law and other next generation stuff he did, and then started going forward to things like Q squared and Imzadi 2 and all sorts of stuff. And then started finding out, oh, he's a comics. He does comics. He's doing Babylon 5 books too. So it's kind of fulminated all out of that pick up, miss, and then go back and grab.
No, interesting. No, it's kind of interesting because I know we're pretty much close to the same age, but actually I know I first encountered him, or at least to my knowledge, I was aware of him in comic work because his first, actually before he did Hulk, what he was doing in was he was on Peter Parker Spectacular Spider-Man. Now let's, since I'm doing the comics, let's do a little background. Peter, grew up like yourself. Although I think he was more on Long Island, in the New York area, and he got a degree in journalism. And I think he worked for somewhere in Long Island, but it was such a quiet place. He realized he had to get out of there because he got excited when he heard that there was a wife beating.
Oh
He
dear.
mentioned that at a convention. He realized, okay, I got to get out of, can't be in journalism in a small town where that's the most exciting thing that's happening, and I get excited about that. So he got a job at the sales department at Marvel, working for a lady named Carol Kalish, I believe that's how you pronounce her name. And so Peter worked sales. I mean, his job was just to, get books on racks and, work managing events. But he wanted to be a writer. I mean, he obviously had a journalism degree, and he got into Peter Parker Spider-Man because I guess they couldn't keep a regular writer on the book, and he was able to sell the editor, if I recall correctly, was Jim Osley, who I think was a pseudonym for Christopher Priest, not the British
Really?
Christopher Priest, not the British Christopher Priest.
Oh, okay. Okay.
There's
I
a
got
Christopher
really excited.
Priest. I believe there's a Christopher Priest. Again, hey, I always keep telling. I haven't gotten any hate mail on this show yet. I haven't told you. And I'm hoping to get. I tell people your hate mail will be graded. But so yeah, no. So yeah, Jim Osley. Yeah, who goes by Christopher James Priest. That's his real name. Uh, liked his stories, and so he got to do the death of Jean DeWolf. Now, for context, Jean DeWolf had been appearing in Spider-Man books. She was kind of like his police connection
Right.
at the time, and so somebody murdered her, and Spidey is investigating, and then in the middle of it, he gets into a fight with Daredevil, and Peter wanted to, play, had some real interesting. I mean, it was kind of a violent book, but at the same time, it was pretty restrained. So that's when I first encountered him, and then I found him all sorts of places. I eventually bought all of the issues of the Hulk when he got into Green, and that's where we want to start there. Comics, I think was the biggest uh portion of his career. Um, and he had a 15-year run on the Hulk. Now, what happened with Spider-Man was there was some tension with him and other writers that, hey, who's this sales guy who's writing Spider-Man? So they kind of pressured to take him off of it. But then the Hulk sales were going bad, and I was just rereading. Um, I showed you this. I was rereading. Peter got to write an autobiography a few years ago in 2021 called "Mr. Sulu Grabbed My Ass" and Other Highlights from My Life in Comics, Novels, Television, Film, and Video Games. And the editor, and I think it might have been Oswald slash Priest again, said, "Hey, listen, we need you. The guy that we got writing has some really silly ideas, and could you do the Hulk?" And the Hulk, I guess, was in trouble. Supposedly, the Hulk might have been, at least they might have suspended the title for a little bit.
Wow, that would be bad.
So Peter decided to do some research on the Hulk, and now you said you read a few issues of the Hulk. Any issues stand out to you, or do you remember any
I
plots at the
I,
time?
I kind of remember the flipping back between the green and the gray Hulk, and like that's even very different kinds of Hulks, and that struck me because I mean I grew up years before this with Dr. David Banner Hulk in the turn of 1979, 1980. So when I come across a Hulk that's actually not a dumb brute was kind of weird for me. I mean, I'd seen it in Secret Wars, but and then and then later it's like, why is the Hulk actually intelligent? It took me a gear shift. And then seeing the gray green split and trying to make sense of it. It's certainly and it almost making him less of a monster and force nature, almost like a kind of a want to be hero, which was I found a really interesting reinterpretation of the character. Hulk as a hero is kind of I mean, yes, we've seen the Avengers, but even so, he's kind of very treated with very much almost as like an unleashed weapon. Now, so you have an army, we have a Hulk. That's not calling him a hero. That's like calling him a weapon. But Peter David kind of broke that mold and kind of trying to make Hulk into more of a hero, if that makes sense.
Well, right. No, the thing is, so when he came on board the Hulk, there were already the Gray Hulk had been established. Now, for a little historical context, the Hulk in his first issue was gray. But I think Stan Lee wanted to give him a more Neanderthal type look. But the problem was in that first issue, they couldn't get a consistent color with that gray, so they decided to make him green and an X book. And I don't think they really explained why he was green. And I think for a couple of years, when they ever reprinted Hulk 1, they would just paint him over in green. But I think before Peter came on the book, somebody decided to make him gray. And one of the things that Peter hit upon was the fact that Bill Mantello, I think that's how you pronounce it, or is it Mentalo, um, wrote a story that Bruce had suffered abuse under his father, Brian Banner, and actually Brian Banner also accidentally killed his wife, his mother, and also he was playing around the whole thing about Green Hulk and Gray Hulk and Banner himself. It was Peter had the idea. Let's play around with multi-personality disorder, which is what was it called at the time. Now I think it's called dissociative identity disorder. And I think he explains that the Green Hulk, at least in its pure form, represented the id. The Gray Hulk, who was crafty, he was clever, and I think,
Yeah.
and that's how the old Hulk was in the early issues. He was kind of devious and stuff, and he was crafty, and so that was the Gray Hulk, and that was the ego, and Banner himself played the super ego, and then, they were battling for these Hulks were battling for control. The Gray Hulk and Green Hulk were battling for control, and eventually in the thing, there would be a merging process, and that's where you get what is now called, I guess, Professor Hulk, the integrated Hulk that we got in Endgame. No, what? Yeah, it was Endgame.
Yeah, it was Endgame, yeah.
So we got the integrated Hulk, And then, Peter played on stories. Now, Peter, we'll get to this probably towards the end of this talk about nonfiction. Peter kind of used the Hulk and his attitude towards the Hulk to explain the concept of selling out, because he just wrote an article about, he wrote a column about just making money does not mean that you sell out, because he said, okay, I will say for right here and right now, I will never write a brute Hulk again. I will not do Hulk smash Hulk unless there's something underlying in it, but no, I'm not going to do that. Now, say an editor comes to me and says, hey, we think people will like the brute Hulk because they love the old TV show. Start writing that. And he goes, well, no, I don't want to do that. And he goes, we'll pay you twice your normal page rate. When's the next deadline? That's selling out. And he was trying to make a point on that. And I don't think he ever did write it, even when he left the book. And I made a mistake. I'm looking at Wiki, and he had a 12-year run.
Oh, 12 years.
He wanted to end it on Hulk 500, Incredible Hulk 500, but he clashed with editorial, and and he actually learned. He said Peter put a lot of himself in his column, and and also the internet. He had he had Genie. Genie was an old bulletin board system type thing, which is a small rival to the gigantic enormous of AOL like companies in the 90s.
But there were a lot of writers I know that were
right. There were a lot
Genie.
of writers there, and Peter would post there regularly. And maybe I'll get to that when we talk about the nonfiction. But so he put a lot out there. And the thing is, he said he learned from Chris Claremont, because Chris Claremont went through the same thing with the X-Men. And Chris wasn't prepared to let the X-Men go. And he saw that Chris kind of went through I guess a down period when he lost control of the characters that he'd had for so long. And Peter realized that, one day he's going to have to say goodbye to the Hulk and everybody with the Hulk, and, to be prepared for that. And that's what happened. And in his last issue of the Hulk, he tried to outline all the storylines he had planned till Hulk 500.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a great run. As I said, I got every issue after he turned green again and banished the Gray Hulk. And Peter obviously gets a mention every time. I think most times that the Hulk is in a thing. I think I've mentioned this in previous shows. If you stay for the credits of any Marvel production, when you get to the Marvel part of the credits, you'll see all the creators that get name checked in name checked in the story that they had to refer to. So I think the Incredible Hulk is what he's going to be mostly remembered to, and everybody, he wanted to come back to a lot. Are there any other comics that you might remember from Peter that wasn't Hulk?
I would have to. I should look at my list, because the list is life. Let's see. I he did do a little Wolverine too, I know. I think I ran into some of that when I started finally getting into X-Men. I didn't really read X Factor much, but and yes, I'm more, if you don't know, much more Marvel than a DC guy. So I know he did plenty of stuff with Aquaman and stuff, but what else? Yeah, and She-Hulk too. He did do some She-Hulk, didn't he? Like
Yeah, he did.
In the 2000s.
Yeah, I think I remember that because I heard. Oh, I think I came on to that one kind of late. I think this is after John Byrne's run, so I think he could have run. I did notice something. I was thinking, Peter came in, started working in the mid '80s, and this is at the same time as the great, I guess, a cultural shift, because this is the same time as Dark Knight comes out, Watchmen comes out. Alan Moore is also doing Swamp Thing, and you have all these dark and, really groundbreaking results. But it's interesting, and I was thinking about Peter because I was thinking about, Dark Knight and Watchmen, and there is a little humor, but not as much. And that was one thing that I think Peter put into all of his works. We'll talk about that later. He put in some humor, and the She-Hulk. I always remember the She-Hulk has this really elaborate restraining system which binds her hands in kind of a gauntlet type thing, and she can't do anything, and she's frustrated because I think she's either talking to someone or talking to somebody, and she wants to do finger quotes, but she can't do it because her hands are sealed in. But there was
Right.
always he always broke the tension. I mean, there were real stakes. I mean, we did not get to a level of camp, although we did have books which are a little bit more humorous. He wrote a book called The Soul Searchers, which was an independent book, and it was all his. And it was about these guys who were trying to, they were kind of like a paranormal investigation type affair, and there would be humorous references to other comics. I mean, there was a
Uh-huh.
Sandman parody one, but it was also it was a very small publisher. You had to order it from your comic book store. It wouldn't be something they would probably get on the rack
Yeah.
uh, randomly, but he was really happy at that. And he did get out one trade paperback, which I think is somewhere in my collection there. Any other comics that you
I,
remember?
I, I, that's about all I remember offhand.
Yeah, I
You're
mean,
much more of a comics guy than I am, so you can talk much more to this then.
okay. Well, no, I did read most of his comics. I mean, one thing that's kind of relevant right now is that he created um, Miguel O'Hara, aka Spider-Man 2099, which
Did
had a
he?
major.
I did not know that.
Oh yeah,
Wow.
no. So they were creating the 2099 line. They were setting some stuff in the future, and again, the biography put in some more details that I didn't know. And Peter. So they were looking. They wanted to do a Spider-Man 2099, and they asked for solicitations. And Peter, in his biography, said, "Well, he looked at it. He was just going to go reverse whatever direction Stan Lee and Steve Ditko went. I mean, he decided to make uh, Peter would, instead of being, an average white guy, decided to make him a mixed heritage uh, person. He just decided to have him a little bit more successful financially. He's working for this big uh, multiplex company, big company, which because of an experiment he gets his powers. Uh, he also created the idea of organic web shooters originally originated with Spider-Man 2099. And
I did not know that. Nice.
yeah, no, it was a fun book. Unfortunately, they I think that might have been, I could be wrong about this. It was the last of the 2099 books because I don't know if it was overall a success. And it was I think the only 2099 character that came back because I think in the 2000s they decided to bring it back. And also I think he got to write something for the Spider-Man video game. I guess you could call up um this is an Activision game. I forget when it was, but I guess he gave him some information on uh how to handle Miguel, and and he wrote a storyline for Miguel in that video game.
Oh.
So no, it was really fun. I did like he eventually became a freelancer, and that's why he could work for both companies, although he would eventually work a little bit more for Marvel for a while.
Hmm.
Um but his DC work was interesting. He got to do Aquaman, and one of the reasons he wanted to do Aquaman was because I think Aquaman was kind of maligned uh because of the TV show.
Oh yeah. Even I knew that. I mean, I didn't read DC much, but even I knew poor Aquaman was a sad joke.
Well, I don't think it was the comics. I think in the comics he might have been okay. I think it was just because, unfortunately, on the TV show,
Super
the
Friends.
writers,
I'm
yeah, the
gonna
Super
talk
Friends,
to Fish.
they didn't know how to write for him. I mean, actually, Filmation gave him his own series before, where he was the protagonist and had his entire supporting crew. He had Aqualad, his sidekick, and also there was an Aqua Girl, and he was also married. I mean, he was married to Mira, and I think
Right.
married superheroes are still were a rarity then. And so, and also he got the opportunity his first introduction to Aquaman was he wrote the Atlantis Chronicles, which was a history of all of DC Universe's interpretations of Atlantis, because he also had Superman's Atlantis, where he had a girlfriend, Lori Lamaris, his college girlfriend, and he, was able to explain the differences between the two and how they're alike and how they're all tied together. So he wrote the Atlantis Chronicles, and well, but in the comic book, the thing is, he was dealing with a lot of stress. It wasn't that he was goofy; it's just that a lot had happened. His son was murdered by Black Manta. His wife went a little insane because of that,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
so Aquaman was kind of, and he led the Justice League when it was moved to Detroit. Um, and that was a weird era. So he just decided, okay, I'm going to shake things up. And in the second issue, he has one of his hands eaten by piranha, and then replaced with a harpoon. And he thought this would be a neat, interesting idea. And he was kind of surprised that he got some backlash of it, because he thought, it's one of those things like nobody cares about the character, and then you do something kind of radical to do with it, and then people start cramming on a book. But he did it on 4 years. I just reread the part of the biography where he mentions that, and the only reason one of the reasons he left was because he was just getting contradictory information from the editorial. It's like, well, do this, but don't do that, and they were completely contradictory things, and he just eventually
You
got
can
tired of it.
navigate that. Yeah.
Yeah, and then he did Supergirl, but the Supergirl thing was kind of interesting because it had to be based on the post-crisis Supergirl, who was this weird construct. And he played around with it, and actually, some people, he was doing Whedon before he did Whedon. Some people said because he set her into this town where all sorts of weird stuff happens, and I think it was before uh, Buffy came out, so he kind of beat her. But I guess time lag, everybody got confused, but she wasn't Kara Zor-El. She wasn't Superman's physical cousin,
No.
relative cousin. But eventually, and he did eventually want to bring Kara Zor-El, and he had this idea of like doing the Supergirl or super family equivalent of Birds of Prey, and called it Blonde Justice, but it never came to being. And then he took some of the ideas of Supergirl and turned it into Fallen Angel, which is kind of this dark, set in this dark city. Now, one of the stories we were talking about during the warm up was that Peter was a guest of honor at our local science fiction convention. I invited him, and he came by, and so I wanted to do a T-shirt design based on his work, and so we made the Bete Noir T-shirt, which is a giant tower and had Bete Noir, and Peter worked with the artist to get it to look like. And we had still a few shirts left over, but I think that was a good shirt design. It was one of our better shirts. Um, we really enjoyed it, and Peter enjoyed it. I mean, I think he was, once we brought him into the collaborative process, some of the ideas that me and the artist were working on didn't go. But I really wanted to do it, particularly for Bete Noir, because again, eventually that was all owned by Peter. I mean, Peter did do his the stuff that he owned was Soul Searchers, a comic book called Sax and Violins, a duo comic, a partnership comic, and then Fallen Angel, which started out in DC as kind of outside the DC universe. And then when DC decided they weren't going to go forward with the book, they let him have the rights, and he published it in IDW. Uh, for what he published it he published it in IDW. So that was good. I'm trying to think of anything else comic wise. I mean, as I said, he was everywhere. I mean, he was a
Yeah, such a
freelancer.
vast of war and such a wide ranging talent. I mean, yeah, you could kind of see his writing once you got to know his writing, but yeah, but it's like just the wide range he went for.
Yeah. The other DC book I think we should mention is Young Justice, because not only he wrote the comic book for a while, but he also got to write a few episodes of the TV series, animated TV series. And actually, the animated TV series, one of the things they did is the Justice League would hide their boom tubes or their Zeta tubes, to teleport. And Peter had his hidden behind what was clearly the TARDIS facade. He never got an
Oh,
opportunity. We'll talk about it in his books. He never did get an opportunity to do Doctor Who. And X Factor was fun. Actually, but Young Justice was interesting because um, he's not a fan of super speed, because he believes any speedster should be able to solve the problem in 2 pages. But Impulse fascinated him because, oh no, wait a minute. He's a teenage boy, if that, and he could be distracted. And he came up with the quirkiness of the Impulse character and had fun with that. And X Factor started, eventually became the Jamie Maddox, was a tie-in to a series based on Jamie Maddox, Multiple Man, and had
Mhm.
fun with that, and essentially a detective agency in the mutant world. And it was fun. I mean, again, all of his stuff was funny. Even in dark stuff, like when he did Fallen Angel, he would try to break the tension with a joke or a laugh. Whereas I think one of the mistakes is in the 90s. I mean, he was kind of above the 90s where everybody went dark for whatever reasons, because they thought, well, that worked for Dark Knight, but we can do it again
Mm,
somewhere else. And unfortunately, I think they eventually figured out that that was wrong by the mid part of the decade. But Peter, no, you don't want to go dark with everything. You got to do, what's right by the character. And he was great in that. So, anything else that comes to mind for comic books before we move to the books?
um, nothing that major comes to mind except they won a bunch of awards and nominations for Eisners and whatnot. So
Yeah,
we should say he was lauded. Luckily, he was lauded that way. It's like a bunch of Eisner nominations, won some awards.
oh yeah, it's very good. Unfortunately, I don't know why, and I feel bad because obviously you and I both follow the Hugos. I don't know why the comic awards are a little bit harder to follow
That
in some ways.
they don't have that intense fandom that science fiction does to promote and talk about them.
Yeah.
And I mean, there are way more comic fans than science fiction fans, but they don't have that intensity to talk about awards. They're not that's not their thing. Whereas, we're kind of in the sea of science fiction writing and awards and stuff, and there's a whole, season and tracking of that. Whereas comics, besides like the Eisners and whatnot, there's not a lot of them, so that kind of keeps there's not that continually boiling stew of awards.
Mm.
So let's
Anyway,
move
so
on, I think. Yeah.
yeah, so anyway, so obviously he was very big on he did do novels. I was actually kind of surprised when he passed away. I didn't realize he published one of the first things he published. He sold something to Asimov's. Um, since we're talking about prose writings, I know he did sell a story where he was playing with the superhero tropes, uh, the fantasy and science fiction. I can't. Let me see if I can find what it was, because it was about a character called Hyperman, and he was playing around with all the ideas and inherited in Superman, and in a fun way. It wasn't mean or sarcastic as I think some people would go, but it was just fun. So, what about Peter David books? What are your favorites?
Well, I will dance with the date that brought me. So yeah, I really do like Imzadi a lot because I think that really encapsulates the Riker Deanna relationship in a way that I can accept. It makes sense. It makes sense of how they started and where they're ending up. I mean, the whole Deanna dating Worf was felt ever always felt wrong.
Well,
And I and
no, you go
so
on.
so and the actress even mentioned that at that convention, Marina Sirtis, this is like he's a Klingon. I mean, I think so. David um kind of recanonized and made officially, yes, the one true pairing, to use a different sort of metaphor, is definitely Troy and Riker, and the Imzadi books kind of tell that entire story outside of the bounds of just the TV show itself and recontextualize it. And I was a little disappointed that I came across an audiobook of Imzadi recently, but it was an edited version. It was cut down, and I was disappointed. It's like I could see why they do it, just to make it a more clever audiobook, but it took away a lot of the characterization we get for both characters. That lovely stuff that David does, and it's like kind of took it out and made it a streamlined book, and I'm like, this is terrible. This is not the book I read and enjoyed. The he did a couple of novelizations of Babylon 5 movies, which I really enjoyed, In the Beginning and Third Space. Because Third Space felt really rushed as a show, but the novelization is one of the good novelizations that actually fleshes out and makes it make more sense. I was just talking to somebody the other day about Lita Alexander and how she's a weapon. And in Third Space, Peter David really brings that home that yeah, she was made by the Borderlands as a weapon. And I really appreciated that. What else? What other books coming off the mind that I enjoyed? I know he did some Captain's Table stuff, which was really good. What else? I've not read his nonfiction so much. But what else? Talked about Babylon 5.
Well, wait, can I ask you a quick question? Did you
Yeah.
read did you read Imzadi 2?
Yes, I did. I read Anxiety. I don't think it's quite as strong as Anxiety 1, but I could see why he did it. So,
Well, there were two reasons I think why he did it. Unfortunately, his first marriage um ended. And also he did try to correct why the whole Deanna and Worf thing, and also tried to set up where Worf would, obviously meet up with Jadzia in Deep Space Nine. And I think he tried, to kind of explain why, why certain things happen. And I mean, but I actually found out, according to the bibliography, he actually wrote Imzadi Forever. So I don't know. Did you read that one by any chance?
I that one I did not read, so I don't know what that one. When was Anxiety Forever? 2003. There it is. I'm looking
Yeah.
at I'm looking at ISFDB now. There it is. Um,
No, but I can tell. The Star Trek books were fun, and he enjoyed it. Although at the beginning they were really a challenge because, unfortunately, and this is a little inside baseball, there was
no,
this
please
guy
do.
called Richard Arnold. Does that name mean anything to you?
It does not. So tell me.
Okay, no, Richard Arnold was somehow he was a guy who somehow got to be part of Gene Roddenberry's entourage. And when Next Generation came about, he was on Gene's staff and he got to be in charge of licensed materials. And the thing is, the guy was not a creative person, and he personally thought when Peter was, and actually Peter worked on the Star Trek comic book. I forgot to mention that. And
Mm-hmm.
DC started a Star Trek comic book in 1983, and I think it ended around 87 or 88. It ended shortly before the fifth movie came out because the contract expired and they had
Oh.
to renegotiate. And Peter wrote, the last part of what we would call volume one, and then the first part of volume two. But then when volume two came out, Richard Arnold, honestly believed that the Star Trek comics by Golden Key were the ideal way to go, and a
Mm-hmm.
lot of those stories were not good in those 70s comics. And Peter thought he was joking and laughed in his face and didn't realize he was serious. and
Whoopsie.
and there was this antagonistic relationship. Now the funny thing, sadly for Mr. Arnold, he did not make friends very well, or at least when Gene passed away, he was literally escorted from the office. uh they let him go and grab his stuff and then took him off the studio. And
Wow.
but then in his biography, Peter said that then they hired a new person who was better creative. And I think obviously Gene died in 91 and Mzadi came out in 90, if I'm remembering correctly, 93. So I or
Yeah,
at least
yeah, Anxiety was 93. Yeah.
so no, he had a much better relation. I mean, Richard Arnold really got weird when he wrote Vendetta. And in fact, if you find a copy now, Vendetta, for those of you who don't know, that was a Star Trek Next Generation novel where they fight the Borg, and the premise is that we discovered that the Doomsday Machine from the original um, show was actually used to be an anti-Borg weapon.
Oh,
And
right. I think I read this. Yes.
But I don't know if it was Richard or some fanboys got weird about the idea because Peter created a female Borg. There was a simulation. Now, again, this was
Before the Borg Queen, yeah.
before Seven of Nine.
Oh, and
Uh,
before something.
so I'm trying to look for it. I'm trying to find the order, but so no, he did Vendetta. Oh, and I got another funny story about Vendetta. So
Mm-hmm.
apparently, Peter David is a very common name, and he found out there was another guy named Peter David, and the guy was also, I think, either a writer or an executive at an oil company. He had a really kind of odd job, but I think he had published some type of nonfiction book that Peter would sometimes get at signings, and I had to explain that that's not him. So he actually found the guy's phone number. I think he might have been British because I think he called up and this British woman says, who may I say is calling? It's Peter David. I wish to talk to Peter David. Goes, oh, Peter David for Peter David. And there was some surreal thing like that. And he gets the other Peter David on the line, and Peter says, I get your book every now and then at my sign. Goes, yeah, I get Vendetta every now and then at my, to sign. And that was kind of odd. So that was a kind of a surreal moment of the two Peter Davids. But no, I forgot, at the time, yeah, female Borg was not acceptable. And supposedly, and no, I saw this in my copy. I checked it out at the library where I work, which says this is an interpretation of Star Trek, which may not be an exact. It was really kind of like a content warning. This is not, it's kind of like Star Trek, but it isn't really Star Trek. And it was kind of insulting. I don't know. I never knew how much they reprinted those, the Trek novels at the time, but I think that stuck with her. I think I brought it up one time um, at a convention or at an appearance. Um, and so, did you read any of his other books that were non-Trek?
The Babylon 5 ones. So I enjoyed
So wait,
those.
did you read the Centauri series?
Yes. That was, yeah, after the series was over. Yeah, I went and
Do you remember what the plot of that was? I didn't get to read I haven't had a chance to read those.
uh oh God, I actually have to look it up. It's been a while.
No, don't worry about it. I mean, I, I just remembered he was asked about it, whether they were. He was asked about it one time, and I just didn't have a chance to read it. I mean, actually, Peter did get Babylon 5, and I think we'll talk about that in his television portion. I did read other.
Oh, what? Wait a minute, Centauri says, are you talking about Legions of Fire?
I thought he wrote a Centauri miniseries
No,
or a three book.
yeah, Legions of Fire. I think that's the one you.
Yeah,
Right. That was stuff is like almost quasi for hire bit that basically was writing on Straczynski's outline. So it was yeah, now I remember. Thank you. These were kind of set towards like in the 20-year future that we see Sheridan in,
yeah.
where Londo's emperor and trying to run the Centauri Empire while still having his little keeper on him, and the Drakh still manipulating him, and Londo's doing his. It's kind of like the tragic. He's doing his best, but he's kind of fated to fall, and we know it. So those books kind of basically flesh out that whole period of Londo trying to do his best, even though he's got this thing that he basically needs to get drunk to put to sleep, and the Drakh trying to mess things up, and he's basically trying to do his best to rebuild this planet and fail. And there's also, I believe, there's a shadow thing that the Drakh have that they're messing around with too, that pulls in the Interstellar Alliance and stuff. But it is really kind of like how do we see Londo as the embittered person at that end where he gets strangled by Jakar? These books kind of help set that up. But far as I recall, basically, David's writing to Straczynski's master plan in that regard.
Well, no, I mean, yeah, no, I think all the novels. I mean, the thing is that was the other thing. That is the one irritating thing about the Star Trek expanded universe is that
Hmm.
neither the twain shall meet. And actually, we you know, you can't. I mean, I remember talking to David Gerald at the last NASFIC last year about because I was curious when they were working on Next Generation, did they ever consider hiring some of the novelists? And I think David admitted that they were open to it, but there was obviously he left the project, and that that kind of didn't go anywhere. And at that time, I mean, it's interesting. David, who wrote really successful Star Trek novels, never got to do a Star Trek script for any of the shows, and he did get to write a Babylon 5. He did get to write Babylon 5 scripts. And we can't mention you. Did you ever read the Excalibur series or um, the Calhoun? I don't know if it's called the Calhoun series or the
Oh,
new front the New
from
Frontier.
New Frontier. I read some New Frontier, but I did not read those.
Yeah, no, Peter got to write a little section of the Star Trek universe, kind of related. I mean, kind of off to the side. It was called a New Frontier. It was the
Right.
USS Excalibur. Again, that came at a time where I just was kind of swamped and I wanted to read. I just didn't have a chance to read it, but it sounded kind of interesting. And he also got to pick characters who had appeared in the show, during the Berman era. Like he had Dr. Solar, who was
Oh,
played by
yeah, and Shelby, yeah.
and Shelby, which I think Peter. I don't know if Peter was sick at the time when Picard came out. Whether we don't know whether Shelby survived Picard, because I think it's, in my opinion, it's ambiguous. I want to like to think that she survived. She survived the Borg attack in the last season of Picard. So we got to have fun with all these characters and just have his own section. And also that's where he got. That's what the part he wrote for the captain's table, which again is something sadly I haven't had a chance to
Oh,
read. Actually,
yeah,
researching.
Captain Table's lots of lot. I mean, it's kind of a gimmicky present, um, gimmicky, what's it called? Gimmicky, idea, but premise, but it's fun to stick captains together, and I've seen it done with I've seen a non-Star Trek version of that too. So it's kind of the idea of like bringing commanders and leaders from across time and space and universes together. There seems to be a need for that or a desire for that, and the Captain Sable's kind of like the Star Trek version of that.
And it sounds like a multi-Doctor story in Doctor Who.
Exactly. Yeah, that's a really good analogy. Thanks, Juan. Yeah, it's kind of like what's the appeal of multi-Doctor story? Like bringing these characters who normally would never meet together and seeing what happens.
So no, no, I'm reading. Obviously to help us with this show, I'm looking at it. There's a lot of stuff that I haven't read, so maybe the sad part is there's still a little Peter David that I don't know about. Um, he he did write one original series novel called The Rift, which is about the Enterprise. Actually, they discover a kind of a stable wormhole which only comes open every 20 years, and they have to deal with what's going on the other side, and they have to do it under a limited time. And also, there was a lot going on, and the portal was first encountered by Captain Pike's, Enterprise, and it was just a fun story bringing back. And also, I think it established how Richard Daystrom redeemed himself after the Ultimate Computer.
Oh,
And in fact, that was part of the epilogue that it was Daystrom's comeback and why he's got an institution named after him in the
the
named after.
Daystrom, yeah, that we see later on. Yeah.
Yeah. So books and his original books, I was looking at one book that he wrote called Howling Mad, which is a wolf is bitten by a werewolf and becomes a man on the night of the full moon, and he finds himself in New York City and falls in love with an animal rights activist. And this is a classic story where he turns things inside out and plays around, and it's filled with humor. It's set in New York, and
Hmm.
and it's kind of funny because the wolf becomes a guy, and he becomes kind of a slouchy guy hooked on bad television, and then the animal rights activist has got to snap him out of it and get him back to his wolf-like nature, because I think he's got a family. I haven't read this. And another independent novel he wrote that was his own characters. Did you ever read Saint Apropos of Nothing?
No, I have not. Have you?
Yeah, I mean, it came out in 2002, and it wasn't about it. it's a traditional medieval fantasy, but the thing is, you're focusing on the guy who's kind of like the squire, who's trying
Mm-hmm.
to make something of himself. He's had a rough life, and unfortunately, I think at some point he realized, wait a minute, I'm not the hero. That guy was the hero, and I'm not. He realizes where his role is his own story. He realizes he's a supporting character in somebody else's story, and I mean, it's not like a meta, breaking the fourth wall type thing. He just kind of realizes this, and he's trying to make a name for himself. It's a little bit snarky in that regard, but and I hadn't read these in a while, and he got to write a few of them. I mean, I'm looking at it, and he at least got to write 3 books, and then I think some compilations and connections, and it was just fun. And you mentioned the novelizations. It was always funny when he had to work on a novelization for something that was kind of bad.
Mm-hmm.
Like Spider-Man 3, he got the original script. He goes, "Oh God, they can't do this." And then he saw the movie. He goes, "Thank God they fixed that," because I think the ending was worse than what was the actual and whatever the ending was for the actual uh story. And he did take it seriously. He didn't see it as hack work. He just treated it as
Yeah,
professionally
yeah,
as he
he was.
could.
Yeah, every bit of work I've read of Peters is shown professionalism, no matter whether it's um make work or novelizations or or comics or what have you. So yeah.
Yeah. I mean, he did do some things. I don't know if under duress, because I think the next generation era, or I should say the Berman era, after Enterprise
Mhm.
went off the air, the novelizations kept going on, and one of the things he was asked to do, and he thought it was a bad idea, was I think he had to kill off Janeway, which of course no longer exists, because obviously, in later, when they brought the shows back, it implied that Janeway was still around, but he tried to do it as professionally and as best as you could with it. So I thought, yeah, professionalism. Also, while we're still on the subject of books, he got to co-author with Jimmy Doohan his autobiography.
Oh, did he?
Yeah, it's called Beam Me Up, Scotty. And the thing is, I think they felt that, the writers of the book, I don't know if it was Pocket. He talks Peter talks about it in his own biography, and I guess they just, he admits that, writing is a hard thing even for a professional, so they didn't, for a rank amateur, for somebody who wasn't used to, and to try to get James Doohan to open up, he just asked him when was the first time he saw television, since that's what his career was mainly revolved around. And he did that, and they were able to get the book together. Although, if I remember the biography correctly, he did not have a lot of broad memories, or at least, no, I should reverse that, the focus memories of when he was working on the original show, because it wasn't important to him at the time, or at least it wasn't clear in his head. And I think Peter kind of supplemented that with research. So I think that covers about the books. I mean, it's a lot of, he wrote a lot of books, uh,
Mhm.
and for the short fiction that he wrote, the story I was talking about from FNSF, it came out in February 1999. It was called The Archetype. He also
Oh,
wrote some.
yeah, I see it here in ISFTV. Yeah.
He also wrote something called Bronsky's Dates with Death, and I can't remember. I just remember it was funny. It was just kind of an insane story dealing with death as the personification of death, and it was just uh, again, oh my God, he did write for Doctor Who. I'm looking at his bibliography. He actually wrote back in the day. They wrote these things called Doctor Who short trips, and
Oh,
this one came out before the Resurrection.
yeah, they're still doing stuff like that in Doctor Who, but a lot of those are audios now.
Well, no, Big Finish published it. I mean, I had some of those
Right.
short trips. I have one. I have one published. I don't know if you know Keith Candido. He wrote actually a
Oh
Tom
yeah.
Baker's. He wrote a Tom Baker story of Tom Baker running around in New York, uh, near the UN, and stirring up trouble there.
The TARDIS at Pool Corner. Well, that sounds fun.
Well, that was a fanzine
that's
story.
fan fiction.
Oh,
But still, that's so funny.
he wrote one of the best pieces of fan fiction. I give it to friends because you remember Beauty and the Beast in the 80s?
Oh yes, written by George R. R. Martin. Yes.
Right. Well, the thing is, I don't know how much of it was, George was in this control, but in the third season, a lot of bad things happened, and Peter didn't like it, and he figured out a way to solve the problems. And he wrote it, he published it in his column. Maybe this is early, but we're talking about his writing, but it was a piece of fiction. So he had Sam Beckett from Quantum leap into Vincent in Beauty and the Beast
Wow.
and prevent all the bad things from happening. And then to make it even more funny, at the end, once he leaps out of Vincent, he apparently leaps into Dr. Smith as the Jupiter 2 is about to launch. So, okay, I think that was the fun part of Peter David's writing. But he also did, as I said, he made he did get to do television. And he actually got to do his own film. Did you ever see Oblivion?
I love Oblivion. I love Oblivion a lot. I mean, one line I like to say to my girlfriend is, "We are an effective team." She has still not yet seen Oblivion, so she doesn't get it, but I say that a lot.
Oh yeah, no, I think I heard about it. I think I heard about it in the column, and I think unfortunately it went. I don't know. I think it might have only gotten a brief um, theatrical release, and then it was direct to video, as you could do movies in those days. What did you think about it? I mean,
Is it a great movie? No, I mean, there are people who don't like Tom Cruise, but on the other hand, it's got Morgan Freeman in it. It's got an interesting story that I think holds up even once you know the twist and what's really going on. I still think it holds up, although one can argue that there are much better ways for the aliens to get what they want than going to Earth for it. But that's the B problem.
oh wait,
So
are we talking about the same film?
maybe not. Oblivion, Tom Cruise.
No, I'm thinking about Oblivion. This is a B movie. It was a direct-to-video movie that Peter
Oh,
got to write. I think it was made.
we are not talking the same movie at all. Oops.
No, the thing is, so Peter was working with Full Moon Entertainment, which was a small, and also he got to do Trancers. I don't know if you ever saw the Trancers
Oh,
series.
yes, I saw the first transfer, so now we're back on.
I think he got to write a later one, a 4 or 5. I got to play around with that. I think he sent him to a medieval world. But no, so the thing is, essentially they wanted a space western, and the thing is, the people that they got for it was they got Meg Foster from They Live. No, it's Day. That's the name of the. They got George Takei,
Yeah.
Julie Newmar, who plays Miss Kitty. I mean, they had fun with this, and I'm not sure. I was trying to look it up on Just Watch whether it's playing anywhere, but for some reason they always keep saying everything plays on Amazon Prime for some reason, whether it does or not. Although it is at the Shout Factory, and it was just a fun movie. It was low budget. It was intended to be low budget, but at the same time they got some genre people and they got to work on it. Uh, if you can find it. But he also got to do Babylon 5. He got to do the 2 Babylon 5 stories. Any thoughts on his 2 Babylon 5 episodes? Soulmates and There the Honor Lies.
Soulmates is the that's the wife's one, isn't it?
Yep, that's the one with the
Yes,
wives.
that is a really good episode with a nice twist at the end.
And
It's
no, you finish.
it's a really good Londo episode. We can kind of see how Londo got wound up in this station in the first place, given the nature of his 3 wives. Yeah.
No, sadly, it was a story that didn't happen. Peter had 2 tries on it because I guess that's the Writers Guild minimum, and it wasn't working, so they were gonna, kill the story. And then Peter said he finally figured it out, and everybody told him, no, you can't do it. You're within the window. But then Peter decided, well, I'll write it as a comic book script and send it to Joe because the script will more or less be the same. There's only some minor changes. And Joe looked at it, and he got a call from Joe, and he thought Joe was gonna yell at him because they were breaking the rules, Writers Guild's rules or whatever. And he goes, no, I want to produce this. And so he did that. And actually, while they were producing that, Peter got to visit the set while they were making it, and goes, "Do you got any other ideas? I think you got the show. What do you have any other ideas?" And it goes, and he gave him the idea for essentially All the Honor Lies, where originally it was going to be Garibaldi shoots Amembari, who was trying to kill him, and he says, "No, make it Sheridan. I think it will work better with
Right.
Sheridan."
Right. But the what really works for that episode one is not the A plot. That's the B plot with the merchandise shop. And Ivanova just losing it. And it's like, we're not some deep space franchise. That no, that the A plot is fine. The B plot is what really drives that
Well, it
episode
was,
better.
but that also led in. Did you ever see? So then Peter got to write his own TV show, Space Cases. Did you ever catch any of that?
I must be like one of the last people in science fiction who've never seen Space Cases. Everyone
Really?
tells me
Well,
about it.
not
Yeah,
necessarily. It was on Nickel. If I remember right, it was on Nickelodeon. It was on a cable
that
channel.
that might explain why I never spotted it.
Well, I'd already moved out of the house by that time, and I had my own cable. And Peter, again, obviously was talking about it. And Space Cases was a good young adult show. Uh, you had kids of various ages, from uh, teenagers to younger children, and essentially they were kind of uh, the wash-ups, or the misfits of the space academy. And then this really cool alien spaceship comes in, and they go on board, and then the ship goes all the way on the other side of the galaxy, and they're kind of they're semi lost. I mean, they know where they are, but it'll take a while for them to get back to, populated space, and they got to deal with all these problems. And the thing is, at the end of There the Honor Lies, about the merchandise store, Sheridan throws out the teddy bear, which,
Right.
the custom teddy bear,
And
because
goes
Joe,
out, gets thrown out of the station entirely. Yeah.
but then it's found on Space Cases. It's found near the spaceship on Space Cases, and then
Oh,
and then
that's
they
a
make a whole joke about, gee, who would be so mean to throw a bear like this out?
hmm,
And everybody had a good laugh. I think Peter decided to end it there because he didn't want to escalate
that's got
the bear war, but he thought it was funny. Sadly, the reason that Peter didn't get to write more Babylon, well, he did get to write an episode of Crusade. Um, but the thing about Babylon 5, and Joe explained it in his biography, was the story editor, Lawrence Attilio, who was a friend of his from his He-Man days, had to move on, or, moved on, so he didn't have a story editor. And they got a late call for season 3. So in order to keep the machine running, Joe Straczynski thought, well, I got to write 6 scripts. When the crew comes back, they'll have 6 scripts to work on, and then I can start working with other writers on my own and get them to write scripts. So he wrote the first 6 scripts, and then he kept writing it until he realized that, wait, I'm gonna be writing the whole season by myself, and that's why it happened. And sadly, we wouldn't see another script, original script, until the last season, and we would do. And so, hey, by any chance, so did you see Young Justice, the animated series?
no. Tell me
Oh,
about it.
okay. I'm trying to remember if it had a what was its broadcast history, but he did get to write episodes. He got to write an episode, I believe, about um, some of the characters that he wrote in the comic book. But the thing is, the series then, I don't know if the series ever had a traditional cable home. Oh yeah, it was originally on Cartoon Network, but
Okay.
apparently the thing is, the Cartoon Network says they couldn't make merchandise off the show, so they canceled it, even though it had, I think, decent ratings, and then it went to what eventually become HBO Max for 2 more seasons.
I see.
So if you got Max, you can catch his episodes, and they were fun episodes. He writes Secrets,
Hmm.
which is about a character named Secret and her a dangerous adversary called Harm. And I think he got to write another one, Insecurity, which has a Starro episode. Oh yeah, he also wrote Bloodlines, which featured Impulse, which is, one of the reasons he had fun writing the character.
Yeah.
And he also did write for Ben 10. I didn't get to check out his Ben 10 episodes, but
I've never seen Ben 10 at all, so as a fandom I know nothing about.
I don't know if that's on Max because that was originally on Cartoon Network. And I thought since Cartoon Network, again, correct me if I'm wrong, although I will judge your hate mail if you get rude about it. Uh, he wrote an episode and he was working for Dwayne McDuffie, who sadly uh, passed away early on. And he actually I think he wrote something which was thinly disguised as a Guantanamo Bay related episode. And, got to explore some interesting issues there. So no, he had a pretty good television art career. Anything more about his work on film and television?
I think I think I've said pretty much what I want.
I just realized we can then talk about, I just realized we can combine not only with his nonfiction, but also his personal life because he talked a lot about it in his nonfiction. For those of you who know, the industry had the Comics Buyer's Guide, which sadly is no longer with us anymore. But in the 90s, Peter got to write essentially an op-ed column. And Peter was inspired by Harlan Ellison, who he got to be good friends with, and writing op-ed opinions. Although he did not have the edginess of Harlan's writing, and I mean that in a
You
loving
mean
and
like the
good way.
glass teat and whatnot? Yeah.
But he did have a very analytical mind, and talked about what was going on in the comic book industry. He did publish, and I found out, and I'm finding out he did actually write a second collection of But I Digress collected articles called More Digressions, a collection of But I Digress columns in 2009. The first one he wrote in 1994.
Wow.
Uh,
Yeah. Pretty good range
But
there.
one of the things he covered was the early rise of Image Comics and some goofy things they were doing on an Image. But he would also throw in a movie review. He would throw in like a proposal he wrote in for the Hulk when they were trying to make a Hulk movie, which was which was kind of interesting. I think he might have published that. I have it to say maybe he published that around the time the Ang Lee movie came out, but I'm not sure. Um,
That's a whole other discussion.
yeah, but
We don't have 2 more hours to talk about Hulk movies.
So Peter, so no, Peter, wrote these columns, and the Comic Buyer's Guide came out weekly. Now sometimes he might just put in a piece of art, or he'll put in something that he put in as I mentioned before, he put in the Quantum Leap, uh, Beauty and the Beast crossover there.
Right.
Oh, we also did this funny thing where it was about panels of imaginary characters. He had all the princesses at the time of Disney princesses doing a panel discussion about being a Disney princess. And he also did it with the Disney villains of the time. And this is during the Disney Renaissance. So it was early to mid 90s after after the Little Mermaid and such things. And he would write it kind of as a transcript type thing, which each character, talking about it, based it sounding like it was a comic book panel.
Mhm.
No, and I was lucky. I had a local comic when where I was living at the time. The comic book store owner did get a copy of the Comics Buyer's Guide and would let me read
Let you look through.
Peter's
Nice.
let me read the column. Well, it was usually in the back. It was actually literally in the back page, if I recall correctly. Uh, and he would just talk about come up with something, come up with 300 words or whatever it was for what it was. But also his personal life was kind of interesting. I live in Orlando, and the thing is, he was trying. He published, I think, in his blog, he tried to his oldest daughter was trying to buy a movie theater in Jacksonville and have it be an independent theater. So this is before I think crowdfunding became an established thing. So he just asked for donations. And I
Yeah.
donated some money, and then I was on their newsletter forever. And sadly, I think last year they lost the lease to their building, so they had to shut down. I don't know whether they'll be back or not. It's a pity because I feel lucky that in Orlando we do have an independent movie theater for foreign and just oddball films. And that was great. I mean, seeing his daughter having going into a creative enterprise of her own. And he was also a great guest. I mean, he was a regular at Dragon Con. If that was the best place to get him. I mean,
I've never
first.
yet been to Dragon. That's maybe one reason why I never actually ran into him in person.
Well, he did a lot of comic conventions, obviously.
Well,
he
yeah.
really did the Florida ones. I saw him at a SuperCon, which is in Miami, near where I grew up. But he never. I think he only did MegaCon once, and I don't know. It just might have been, hey, they didn't invite him for whatever reason. But he was also a local. Maryland had two media conventions. Shore Leave, which have been going on forever. I mean, I went to three of them in the 90s. And also, it's like Shore Leave was in the spring, and in the fall was Farpoint. Oh, and Peter created this thing called Mystery Trekkie Theater 3000.
Oh, based on Mr. Science here,
Yeah,
3000?
essentially, I think they made a Klingon-looking puppet, and he and Robert Greenberg, I want to hazard to say Michael Jan Friedman, because the cool thing about both Farpoint and Shore Leave was that they brought in a lot of the Trek novelists at the time, and this is the 90s when I went there. And so they would just try to do the thing where they were in front of the screen and they'd watch. When I got there, they did some first season. One year they did Justice from the first season of Next Gen. And what was the other? Oh, they did Angel One another year. But it was just funny. They were trying to get the quips. I mean, obviously they did rehearse it. They did, try to plan out the jokes. It wasn't improv. It and I first heard about it when he talked about it, because a few years before I got there, he wrote about the time that they did it with Next Gen. They actually did it with the episode Shore Leave, where Peter or somebody kept saying 10 minutes to Wapner. And they wondered, because I guess they felt that the guy who ran the Shore Leave planet looked like Judge Wapner.
Oh, God.
No, and it was just, and he did another fun thing. One time, it might have been, I'm trying to remember, it was at one of the convention, must have been Farpoint, because Farpoint's in the fall. The convention fell in the middle of Yom Kippur, and Peter was an observant Jew, but also they put his author segment, like an hour with Peter David at noon, and he felt bad that people might miss lunch just to see him, so he ordered 10 pizzas. And he said, "Hey, don't worry about me. Today's Yom Kippur. I cannot eat, but please enjoy. And I'll read you. I'll tell you what I'm up to, and I'll read you a sample of my work."
Talk about being a mensch.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, we bought 10 pizzas, and we all had free pizza.
So how many times have you met him, Juan?
So I think it was 4 times when I was living up north, and then I went to 2 Dragon Cons. No, I went to 3 Dragon Cons, and he was Dragon Con. One of the things he did was he emceed the costume contest. And the thing is, when there was an odd type of costume that blew, he would go, "What the hell was that?" And it became a routine, to the point that when a weird costume or something kind of unexpected or odd came out, the crowd would say, "Say it, say it, say it," and that became his line, is, "What the hell was that?" And I think when I did go to Dragon Con in '99, and he did, I think he and whoever was co-hosting it with him were dressed as Jedi, and they came out with Duel of the Fates.
Dear, wow. They went there, didn't they?
Yeah, no, he always tried to have fun. No, he was just a fun guest. I mean, he would try, being an entertainer. He was very. Oh, and I had a roommate who was a comic artist. His name was Arnie Starr. I think he told me that he set up his office so he could get there by bat poles. That he could just, he had, I guess he had his office that he could get to by the bat poles, and he had the whole Shakespeare thing. So you never got to see him at all? You never got to see
No,
him?
I never got to meet him.
I don't know if wherever you lived, they had it. I mean, the thing is, when you were growing up, he was, you were in Staten Island. He was living, I forget, oh God, was it Bay, is it Bayport? Is Bayport a city in Long Island?
Bayport.
I think that's where he said he was, he hanged his hat, because I know he lived in Long Island. Most
Bayport.
of his
Right. In Iceland. Yes.
So, that's where he lived most of his life. And I get, he would go to anywhere that in.
I didn't go to a tremendous number of cons. That's kind of what killed me. I mean, it's possible I was in the same building as him, going to comic book stores in New York City. If he had done a signing, maybe I was there at the same time. Remember, I didn't really connect the names at the time, so could have missed it entirely. Didn't realize that uh he was there and he was signing. I mean, that's also true of a broken step who we're not going to name, who signed at a comic and game store on Staten Island in the late 80s. Which I went to a lot. So it's possible I saw the man who I actually never actually officially met way, way, way back when, but we're not going to talk about that broken step. We're talking about Peter David.
Yeah, no, I get it. No, I mean, I guess no, I lucked out. I mean,
You lucked out, and I really value the interactions you've shared here tonight.
sadly he got sick, and he was hospitalized at least for a while. I mean, I started following on Patreon, and a lot of it was sadly requests for GoFundMe, because I think for some reason he lost his Medicare, and that's being discussed. I mean, um, his widow, his his widow is, dealing with what's going on as best she can. I mean, she posted a uh post-S article on Peter and how she's dealing, and
Yeah.
no, we got a nice actual talk on Fat Man Beyond. Kevin Smith and Mark Bernardin said some really
Mhm.
kind things about him, and unfortunately, the fact that it's the comic industry is not very friendly to labor, and it's hard to unionize when they don't have control of the flow of labor, since management can actually outsource it to places where they can't control. But no, he had a really fun career. Sadly, I don't think I think he wanted to do. I gotta find this One Faithful Night and story, because he did make Doctor Who references a lot in his articles and stories, but he never. In the 90s they started doing original Doctor Who novelizations, but I don't think they were interacting with Americans. But I really did always want to see a Peter David um, short, a Peter David Doctor Who story. And actually, that's pretty good that we're ending on that, since this is we do like doing a lot of Doctor Who on this podcast, so that'll make Mark
Yeah,
happy.
yeah, that's a good way to, yeah, bring this around. Yeah, it would have been nice.
So I mean, Paul, you got any final thoughts about Peter David and his career?
It is it. I mean, his ending is tragic, and that we have to talk about this and his final days and his health issues. But I don't want to lose sight of all the good I got in reading and engaging with all his work for the last 30 years. Yeah, 30. Yeah, that's right. What, 30 years of engaging with his work. That's a legacy I can get behind.
Yeah, same thing. I mean, from uh, that first issue of Peter Parker to, his biography, where he also put in some humor about that. I mean, I don't think I've had a chance to read anything else. So no, it was a great career. If you haven't read Peter David, he's probably, he's very available. Try to read his prose, try to read his comics. Hopefully, I don't know if libraries have his collections of the Hulk or Spider-Man, but try to find him. If anything, go on Marvel. I know that Marvel .com has a full run. A few months ago, I should say, I checked out, I reread some of his Peter Parker. They did collect the Death of Jean the Wolf as a trade, so maybe
Mhm.
you can find that at a public library. But do find his work. it's worth your time, and if anything, it'll bring a smile to your face because he always knew where to inject the humor and make it count. So I want to thank Paul for coming over here and helping me out doing this Peter David Memorial. Um, and Paul, where can we check you out? I mean, you're also a podcaster too.
I'm a podcast. I do podcasts for the Skiffy and Fancy Show. I am found all over the internet with book reviews and whatnot as Prince Justin. That's PrincejVSTIN. You can find my book reviews, comments, all sorts of things. I throw a rock on the internet and you'll find something I've written or commented about.
Yeah, and check out File 770. Paul writes some great pieces on that for
yeah,
people.
that's another place as I said, like right all over the internet. And I appreciate it. I appreciate you letting me come here to talk about Mr. David's work.
Well, I'm glad you came. And that's it for this issue, this episode of Mark Who 42. And we'll come back to you as soon as we can. Everybody take care.
You've been listening to Mark Who 42. Your hosts, Mark Baumgarten, Vicky Jakubowski, Juan Sanmiguel, and Zion Quiros. Mark Who 42's universe is produced and directed by Mark Baumgarten. Copyright 2025.